They weren't supposed to hear that. Hey. It's your host, Troy Smith. Welcome to the Night Lounge, everybody. Oh, I don't like that one. I like my claps. There we go. We got somebody very important on the line today. Julian Waddell. What's up, my friend?
What's going on, Troy? I'm glad to be here.
You glad to be here? I'm glad you're here too, man. We got education on the phone today. An educator going to talk to us today about the tales from the Greenwood District. Maybe you've heard about it, maybe you have not, but it is AKA formerly Black Wall Street, right?
Yes. Tulsa, Oklahoma.
We've heard a lot about it so far. A lot been going on about the Tulsa Massacre. But now that that's over, Julian, which is good to talk about now, what is it? Is it now by the wayside?
Oh, no. See, I one of the things I wanted to, I guess, bring up, especially when it came to even talking about this book, is how important to still remember how things were before the massacre. Mm-hmm. Because learning from those types of lessons will inform how we should continue to move forward, to build, to grow, and to stimulate our economy.
Nice. Stimulate. As you can see, he's an educated brother. He talks with a very clear voice and diction.
You know? Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, how do you feel, Julian, when someone say, "Oh, you talk so nice"?
I have no problem with it.
Yeah, no problem. Never heard nobody say, "Oh man," I would say somebody that don't look like you say, "Oh, you're so elegant."
Also,
that's a different thing, right?
That's different.
Okay.
It's like, because of course it's what's implied when that's said. But in regards to just being in general, just in regards to being able to talk, you have to be able to communicate, to be able to break down the things that you want to be able to say clearly and concise.
Now, I've oftentimes, when I do some speaking, I talk about how growing up in the inner city, if you talk any type of way of educated or with clear enunciation, you're acting white. Have you ever been encountered that before?
Yes, when I was younger. See, it's like that's one of the things that I feel that a lot of us as Black people have to deal with, especially when it comes to code switching. Because code switching means that when you're in different environments, you encounter having to change how you communicate. And so when you're sometimes talking a certain way, it's like I've been told, "Oh, when I was younger, you talk this way," but being able to talk a specific way has nothing to do with your race. It's just basically just talking.
Mm-hmm. That's true. But code switching, go back to that. We ain't even got into the history of who Julian is. We ain't got there yet. We're going to. But go ahead. You done brought up some keyword code switching. Talk to us about code switching right quick.
All right. So let me ask you this. It's like, this is something I remember when I was younger. Like whenever, when I was a kid and my mom would answer the phone, depending on who called, it would be a different type of tone. It's kind of the same type of tone when you're in a job interview and you have to do a phone interview. Your voice, all these different things change to basically assess how you want to be how you would specifically want to communicate. And so I feel like that's something that Black people has had to do more often than not. They've had to be able to live in multiple environments and being able to switch up depending on who they're interacting with.
Well, hey, I hope y'all hear that. And I got some people that's gonna be listening, and I know y'all folks out there may have heard this before about code switching. Your mama done start talking different on the phone, or your sister or someone, they just changed their whole voice and diction in general. But code switching is something that's very true. Just like the way you dress, right, can play a big part of it. But man, we're here to talk to Julian about his book that just came out, Tales from the Greenwood District, which is going to be actually focusing on the stories of people, because it's a fiction book, and I'm not really a fiction person. I'm more of a nonfiction reader. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Nah, I understand completely.
Yeah, but I like the fact that you actually got historical information with these stories, right? So you taking these ideas actually taking these characters and they living out this life before the massacre, like before the whole deal to come up. They're talking about how they making it through life. You got a person that's a waitress, a person that's a World War II veteran, and things like that. Talking about how they have their experiences through their eyes. Tell us about what made you even want to write this book in the first place.
Well, if I can go all the way back to
the Reading Rainbow.
Okay. Yeah, so you Reading Rainbow.
I have read your book. Oh my God, I actually did some research, and I read everything from the forward to the dedication, I read all of it. So when I say I read a book from front to cover, front to back, I literally do that. I actually read everything.
Okay, all right. So I'll start before Reading Rainbow.
Okay.
So one of the things that the very first person that I had in my dedication was my great aunt.
Mm-hmm.
My great aunt, she recently passed, and one of the things that I really wanted to do was to be able to ask her questions. The reason why that was important is because my grandfather, their parents, they came from Oklahoma.
Oh.
And I wanted to know their backstory because all I knew was the fact that they came and there was a something devastating, something traumatic that happened, and nobody in our family ever talked about it. And so it was key for me to want to learn that type of information. Now, at the same time, going to when I was younger, there was the Young Writers Illustrator competition that came out on PBS back in the day. And I used to be a huge fan of LeVar Burton.
Mm-hmm.
So when that came out, I was in 3rd grade and I wanted to be able to write. And I wanted to write about history and things like that because I loved history back when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I never actually got to submit my book or anything like that, but it's something that's been on my mind for years. So finally, when I decided that I wanted to be able to meet my aunt and ask her questions about our past, I didn't get an opportunity to. And so I decided that I'm going to start doing my own research and find out everything that was connected to my family. And I'm still researching now, but in the process of doing that, I learned more about Tulsa, Black Wall Street, how it was founded and things of that nature.
Right. So, but you said a key thing that we always run into, and you don't have to be old. You don't have to be, man, being Black is hard. That's just the truth. Being Black is real. Sometimes it can be pretty tough because we don't want to remember a lot of stuff. And then you have a lot of individuals from the past. Like I'm like you, I'm inquisitive. I want to know the history. We had a point now that we have that ability to be able to read certain things and research things where you can actually learn the history. But all the time when you speak to someone that's of older age, it's like they forgot.
Yeah, it's because it's so traumatic. See, the thing is, and you have to look at it like this, and this is also one of the reasons why I wanted to write about before the massacre.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, whether it's the massacre or police brutality that we deal with right now, what is usually discussed is the traumatic experience. Like when you think about all the people from Trayvon Martin to every single person that we march for, and when we say Black Lives Matter, all we talk about is what happened to them. We don't talk about what their dreams were, what their aspirations were, what did they actually want to be, because not one of those individuals ended up going down the path that they went down, that traumatic experience, thinking that they were going to end up being a martyr.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that even when you talk about our ancestors, our people, our family, they think of all the things that were taken from them. And it's very, very hard to actually just think about all the things that happened that led up to it, all the things that they put into it because of the trauma that's associated with it. So I wanted to basically shine a light on those positive elements, because no matter what, you're going to see a movie about slavery. You're going to see a movie about something traumatic, but how often are you going to see something that's going to talk about things that are prior to that? Because we are more than just that traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things I wanted to make sure that I put a main focus on. If you notice in my book, not at any point in my book do I talk about the massacre. I lead all the way up to the massacre. And the reason being is this is the 100-year anniversary. You'll see every single book, every single article, every documentary talking specifically about the massacre. But it's extremely important for us to be able to not only understand that yes, the massacre happened, but we actually created something wonderful, beautiful, magnificent that we should be proud of, to be able to share and say that despite all of the adversity that came against us, we were able to create something magnificent.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the negative part.
Okay.
We're going to go straight to the story in general. We're going to get more into your history about who you are, right? But then also more about the benefits of what happened beforehand.
Okay.
But it was one thing that stuck out to me in the forward now that stuck out to me when your guy Ford, that wrote the forward for you, which I'm looking forward to. I'm hoping there's a movie created from your book.
I'm hoping so too. I'm from your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah, well, this guy that wrote this, it said he's a films guy, right?
Yes, Justin Mickens.
Yeah, Justin Mickens. So hopefully, I don't know if you have any input, and then you're also over the Entrepreneur Center there where you are. So you probably find a young film director or someone that want to do something, get some project going. I'm hoping for that.
I would love that.
Well, he wrote something in the book about about Derek, is it Chauvin?
Yes.
But how he got convicted and things like that. And he was feeling delighted about it and hoping that, hey, I seen justice served and all this and that. Then he said, not even a couple hours later, Nancy Pelosi got on TV and said the Democratic Majority Leader, Nancy Pelosi, gave a speech addressing the conviction. 2 minutes, not even 2 hours, 2 minutes and 15 seconds in. She said, "Thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing yourself for justice." Now, George Floyd did not sacrifice himself for anything, he said. Then he went into detail about how, I'm talking about the guy that wrote the forward. If someone had told me that this desire will lead to me dying in a viral video, I would have stayed at home and ate plain yogurt. He talked about how he was going to go out and get some yogurt, some blueberries for his yogurt. And he said, no one actually intends to go. I don't think Emmett Till intended to get killed, right? I don't think all these names of people that they intended to do so. And then people up here saying that, hey, thank you for dying for justice. That's not what their plan was. They wasn't a martyr. They wasn't a civil rights leader. So you can touch a little bit on that too. You said people actually be trying to cover it up with, oh, they died for justice.
And see that's one of the things. Is like it makes it the focal point. See, at the end of the day, yes, these people need to be remembered. Yes, we need to say their names. But one of the additional things that needs to be said is, who were these people? Mm-hmm. What did they want in their life? What were their aspirations? And just like George Floyd or Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, all of these individuals, that wasn't their goal.
Right.
Their goal wasn't like, I'm going to do this for the cause. And see, and that's one of the reasons why, that is exactly the reason why it's very, very important to not only talk about who these people were, so you can be able to think about them and think about who they were and what did they want out of their life. It allows us to be able to put more than just a name or hashtag associated with them. Mm-hmm. It allows us to see that these people were human beings that deserved to be able to be remembered more than the footnote, which is how the traumatic experience impacted their life.
Right. Well, it all started from your boy, Dick Rowland. Poor Dick Rowland, 17 years old. I just like the fact that you actually had some history in there to break it down about you. In your book, you actually talk about how it started. You bring it all up to how it started, where it all came from, who did what. And then who actually, I think you're going to talk about who even found it, who even mentioned the whole idea about Black Wall Street.
Yeah.
But you actually have some historical facts about it. This guy, Dick Rowland, was just there. He tripped getting into the elevator. And then the white girl, the young lady, her name, and it's got the name of her in here too. Sarah Page got startled. She was an elevator operator, got startled, and she just got scared. But then the people around her said, "Oh, did he try to rape you?" Like, no. And she even said, "No, nobody tried to rape me. Nobody did any assault to me. I just got startled." And they like, "No, he tried to rape her." And they put him on. They're gonna lynch the guy.
The interesting thing about all of this is that the fact that she said that no, this didn't happen. You have to think about when he got arrested. He got arrested the next day. If it was something that constituted some type of assault or anything, he would have been arrested that day. She didn't press charges. She said nothing like that happened. And even when you look at the records after the fact, the record still shows that she still said that nothing bad happened. He didn't do anything wrong. So keep that in mind. So the next day is when he got arrested. And that happened after you see a newspaper article where it says nab Negro because he attacked a white woman. So in the process of doing all of that, that basically was the dog whistle to get the crowd ready to be able to lynch Dick Rowland.
And then, so what happened when the black folk found out about it?
Yes.
For World War II vets, they said, man, we ain't going. They went down there and met the mob and actually put out that gun and started letting it go.
So let me go back. So, all right,
break into it.
All right, so it was this World War I vet specifically. It's like, so now in order, before I can even go into the vets, I have to show a little backstory for these vets, right? Now, keep in mind, this is World War I coming to an end. These people, the reason why a lot of people went to or participated in World War I is because they had the thought process. W.E.B. Du Bois at that point was basically, he wrote, I think it was in the NAACP newsletter called The Crisis. I believe that's what it's called. The name is not rolling off the top of my head, but I think it's called The Crisis. But he wrote, I think it was early in 1918, about the fact that if we're going to actually make a difference, we need to basically join the war effort and join shoulder to shoulder with our white counterparts to fight for our country. He advocated for that at that point. So when African Americans went over to World War I, they felt that, okay, I'm doing this for our country. I come back, I'm going to get a piece of this American dream. I'm going to be treated like an equal. Now, of course, come back, that's not how it is. Even W.E.B. Du Bois said later in another article that, like, you know what? I was wrong in my previous writing, basically, with more words or less. But if you're going to come home, you need to make sure that you are treated as like if you're going to go over there and fight, you need to go over there and make sure that you're going to defend what's yours. He even came to Tulsa 2 months earlier before the massacre and actually was advocating that because people were getting lynched in Oklahoma. So, full story. Obi Man, one of the individuals, one of the World War I vets, marches into the Dreamland Theater. It's like, you can look this up. He says, "Turn on these lights. Like one of our boys is about to get lynched.
Wow.
We need to go and take care of that right now." So they go there. All these World War I vets, all prepared. They go there. They get to the courthouse. They see this mob, thousands of white people. Right? Go to the front. They said, "We're here to ask protection." They all have their weapons, everything. We're here for protection for Dick Rowland. Whatever is said, they're convinced that, okay, we can walk away. It's going to be all right, because whoever the person at the front that's in charge of the courthouse says, you know what, nothing's going to get past us. I promise you. Now, the reason why that's important to note is because a year ago, this is not in my book. You can do the research on your own, but I just want to say a year ago, a white person got lynched.
A year prior.
Yes, a year prior, a white person got lynched, right? And so the black people at that point were saying, if they're going to lynch a white person, you know they're going to try to lynch us. So we're going to go and actually make sure that doesn't happen. Now, at the same time, some of the officer, the chief at that point was basically saying, I promise nothing like that's going to happen this time around. It's like I'm not going to make sure it happened. And that's why they were walking away. Now, as they walked away, a person in the crowd tried to reach. It's like, this is what has been stated. Try to reach for Obi Man's gun, the World War I vet I was telling you about earlier. And he was like, what are you going to do with that gun? Obi Man is heard saying, whatever I need to do, if I need to do it. Then it goes into a tussle. A warning shot comes out. And that's when the fighting starts. Now, this is one of the things that a lot of people don't really talk about. That's interesting. During that time frame, 12 people got killed. 10 of them were white people. 2 of them were African American. That's interesting to note because in the very beginning, those well-trained African American veteran World War I soldiers were able to hold their own. And as the only thing that was causing them to not be able to go was at that point, more and more people on the white side was coming and pushing them back. And when the National Guard came, the National Guard didn't come to basically just break up people or anything like that. They came to basically have a one-sided viewpoint of how they were going to go about and basically round up these African Americans and put them in detention camps. When that happened, that's when all of these white citizens of Tulsa came in and started their massacre. People were bombing, so on and so forth. Those things were happening during that time frame. But if it wasn't for the National Guard at that time rounding up African Americans and putting them in detention camps, the black people were holding their own, making sure that the white mob didn't cross over. If anybody gets a chance, look up O.B. Mann, M-A-N-N. Just his story alone, it'll pull a rabbit hole of what type of soldier these World War I veterans were.
Well, I mean, let me see. Got a little. Let me know if y'all press some new button for me, Julian.
Okay.
So there we go. So what's interesting is that all the historical facts that he's mentioning are somewhat mentioned. I mean, not somewhat, are mentioned in his books, and he has more. So I'm looking forward to the part 2. Now, there's an individual on here that said they want a copy. They have to have a read. They got to read this book. I want you to put your name in there or inbox me on social media, and I'm going to send you a copy of this book. I got a copy of his book right now. We're going to make sure you get it. But right quick, Julian, I want you to tell us, because we don't want to give the whole thing away, but just give a little bit about your history a little bit. 'Cause I know in your book you mentioned about your mother. I mean, your aunt, you wanted to know more about, so she's gonna, get some more. You wish you had more time with her. Your dad, your mom always encouraged you to be all you can be. Your dad was encouraging you about history, right?
Yes.
So give a little bit about that background a little bit, and then we'll go into the development of Black Wall Street. And then we're gonna stop because we want them to read the book so they can get some more information from the ideas of the true factual stuff that happened.
Okay. So both my parents, my dad, both my parents are entrepreneurs. But one of the things in regards to entrepreneurship that I always learned from my parents is that entrepreneurship for African Americans, that's just in our DNA. And let me clarify what that means. If you think about from slavery, just thinking about slavery, I mean, of course, I can go before slavery as well, but let's just think about just saying from slavery, right? From slavery, it's not like we were able to just get jobs. Of course, segregation, Jim Crow laws, all those different things holding us back. So what did we do? We started our own businesses. That's something that happened, right? Like not only after, but even during slavery. Those were the type of things that we had to do to be able to survive. So when you think about us, like whether it's mom, aunt, cousin, there's someone that has a side hustle that that's in your circle.
Facts.
That's not just something that just came. That's something that came from us. That's in our DNA. That's us from generations. And so with that being said, going into my parents from a child, my first business that I ever started, I'm talking about legitimate business, LLC, was when I was 10. And it was through the encouragement of my parents that I was able to actually grow and have that type of mindset that I can build. So when I say along the line of my dad and history, my dad would always talk about that in order for you to be able to learn how to go into the future, you need to be able to learn from the past. And that basically applies itself to business. So if you want to look at how to scale your business, how to grow your business, look at a business that was successful. Like if I was to say, I'm going to talk about a business everybody knows about, Walmart, right? One of the things that you see strategically that Walmart did is they went to all of the small rural areas as they started. They went there instead of the big cities because they knew that they could be the one-stop shop for everything there. And so learning about the history of businesses, learning about the history of how different things happen is one of the things that I was always encouraged to connect the dots. And that led into history as a whole, especially African-American history, Black history. And when I said in regards to my aunt was my granddad on my dad's side's sister. And I never got a chance growing up to ask my grandfather any kind of questions about us. But I recently found out that I had an aunt and I had never met her. And so when I decided to make it a point to try to reach out and meet her, the pandemic happened. And in the process of still wanting to meet her, she ended up passing. And so I had to continue to do my research outside of getting to know her. And so,
yeah, I mean,
this came from.
So you've been wanting to do this since 95. I mean, you started working on this 20 something years ago, 20 plus years ago.
Yes.
With Reading Rainbow, brother played Star Trek and on, I think he played Roots, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you got Kuta Kinte. Yeah.
It's funny that you should say that. It's like LeVar Burton specifically, he was integral into my development. So I'm not saying any of this as a brag or anything like that, but I just realized as I was writing this book, a lot of the things that I did had a lot to do with a lot of the roles that he played. So let's go all the way back to Roots, right? Roots, Alex Haley's breakdown of how everything happened is one of the big motivators of how I wanted to write this type of book, right? LeVar Burton, when he played on Star Trek, he was the engineer. And my background now is information technology. I worked for NASA before I was a professor. But I didn't recognize until I was writing this book how much of an impact LeVar Burton had on my life. And so when you'd have that, plus Reading Rainbow and the love of books, the love of what storytelling can be for us, it was something that basically what became the foundation or cornerstone to the person that I am now as an educator.
Is he still around?
Yes, actually. He
actually hooked that up.
He has a book club right now. He was recently I think he's scheduled to be a guest host for Jeopardy. And I've been following him for a while. So I was like, I'm hoping that one day I can get this book in his hands.
We're gonna send it.
Okay.
We're gonna get you a sign.
Well, then that's what I'm gonna work on.
Well, briefly, man, tell us about when, like you said, W. Du Bois and I think George Washington Carver.
Booker T. Washington, actually.
Booker T. Washington, sorry. Tell us a little bit about how Black Wall Street even came about.
All right, so I'm from Huntsville, so that's another very important element in my research. I found out in my research that O.W. Gurley from Huntsville, Alabama, he was part of Grover Cleveland's presidential appointments. Now, that's very important to note because a lot of people don't realize that after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, Black people had presidential offices. Like, we were able to vote. We were senators. During that time frame of Reconstruction, Black people were doing better in that small bracket of time than they were in the civil rights movement almost 100 years later. So O.W. Gurley, presidential appointment, like I said, he ends up stepping down from that presidential appointment and he relocates to Oklahoma. During that time, Oklahoma was called Indian Territory, and they were doing basically when you run and do the land claim and you can claim your land, so on and so forth. Now, at that exact same time, I don't want to give too much away, but I wanted to say this. A lot of Native Americans were relocated to Oklahoma, then Indian Territory, and they had slaves. A lot of people don't talk
about.
Huh?
Which I was more about.
Yes. Now, here's the thing that is interesting about that slave ownership, that when they relocated to Oklahoma after the Civil War, the slaves of Native Americans had to be set free as well. Now, so you have this perfect storm where everybody probably have heard about the 40 acres and the mule that we were supposed to get. In that particular situation, African Americans that were owned by Native Americans were actually able to take advantage of getting land due to the Dawes Act. And so you would see African Americans having land, their 40 acres in Oklahoma. And so because of that, Oklahoma also was an oil, it produced before 1915, 25% of the oil in the United States. And so you see all of that create the perfect ecosystem for Black success. So O.W. Gurley, he is able to not only get this land, which is not that far from one of the Glenpool oil areas that was found at the time, and he was able to develop Greenwood District into what it became. And that's one of the major points. And it wasn't until Booker T. Washington came to visit that he saw all of these great accomplishments that these Black people were doing, that he called it Negro Wall Street.
Press mute for me.
Okay.
So that's the one that's important, because when you just said the fact that Black appointees, people was actually been appointed, presidential appointments, that's huge. When they always say at one time, like, we just never had a chance. It was there. And then also you mentioned about the Republican Party, actually, who was the progressives then, wanting to see new things happen. Go ahead and talk about that.
Well, I can't necessarily, I would say it's like throughout history, roles switched. Like basically they always represented two sides of the same coin. So what you would see is that at that time, it would be progressive Republicans going against racist Southern Democrats at that point. But of course, through history, positions changed back and forth. It's like the Republicans of the past ended up being the Democrats of the future. It just ended up switching roles, so on and so forth, depending on that. But here's something that's interesting that I want to talk in regards from a political standpoint, right? So the president during that time,
Woodrow Wilson?
Yes, Woodrow Wilson. The reason why that's interesting, he was the first president that came from under the Confederacy. Not saying that he lived in the Confederate state when he became president, but that's where he was born. He was born under Confederate rule, right? So he basically was the representation. He was the first president that was the representation of the Confederate type principles at that point, right? At least that's one of the biggest things that you'll see from a lot of his policies. And he rolled back a lot of the things that you saw of all of the the positive things that Reconstruction did for African Americans after slavery. So this same person also, if you look into history, he also was the person that played Birth of a Nation in the White House. And if you know about Birth of a Nation was a movie that basically advocated for the fact that we shouldn't vote. This is what's going to happen if we vote. And it basically advocated for the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. So you see all of these rolling back of Black rights, more Jim Crow laws, more segregation type of rhetoric, and all of these different things happen, and the Spanish flu. And another thing in that same instance, it's like I mentioned before about the World War I veterans coming back, the Spanish flu happening, a racist president, all of these different things created the perfect storm. But here's something that a lot of people don't recognize. If you look up 1918 Spanish flu in Tulsa, you see how bad it was in Tulsa, but not so bad in Black Wall Street. The Spanish flu was devastating. But in 1918, in Tulsa, in Black Wall Street, Black people were still flourishing. They weren't impacted the way that white Americans were impacted by the Spanish flu during 1918 in Black Wall Street. And if you think about all of the jealousy and all the different things from all of the flourishing of that community, when you see these same people not being impacted as badly by the Spanish flu, that's another layer of what could have driven these individuals to massacre all of us in the Greenwood District.
Got you. So this is what we're gonna do, man. So before we can be on here for days talking about this stuff for sure. But what I would like you to do right now is to touch a bit on your book of why they should read it, and we're gonna close it out. Because I know why I should read this. It's beneficial, but you tell us.
Okay, no problem. Like one of the very first things I said when we first started is that in order for us to really be able to see ourselves, see what we were able to accomplish, despite all of the things that were happening to us, like segregation and so on and so forth, we were able to flourish. One of the things that is like, even when you mentioned earlier about like how sometimes people say like, oh, we never get an opportunity. It's not about the opportunity. We always take advantage of those opportunities. The problem is within those opportunities, there's always something that happens that is meant to halt us. So when you look at the Greenwood District, you look at what was built, you look at what was created, that was created despite the racist, the segregation, all of those different things, and they still were flourishing. It took a massacre to stop their trajectory. And it only stopped it. It only stopped it. They still continued to rebuild. It wasn't what it was before, but it showed that if they were able to continue on the trajectory that they had, they were unstoppable. I look at it the same way that you would look along the line of, did you ever watch the movie Black Panther?
Oh, come on, man.
Of course, I had to ask anyway.
But you probably was out there taking notes and everything like that. You probably didn't just watch the movie like I did.
Oh, I had to watch a couple times because see, it's like right there. It's like if you look at how Black Panther, how Wakanda was, you have to look at all of these enclaves that were sprouting up across the United States. A lot of people would think that Black Wall Street was just in Tulsa. There was also another Black Wall Street in North Carolina.
Oh,
there were a lot of different Black communities that were flourishing. There were a lot of Black communities that the dollar circulated completely there. And it continued to grow and grow and grow. And what ended up happening? They were attacked. And so I don't want the focal point. And the reason why I wrote this book, I don't want the focal point to be about the massacre, because the massacre in and of itself, it's important, but it doesn't show what we built, what we're capable of. It shows us as victims. And all of the things that you see, whether it comes from our enslavement, or all these different things, it doesn't just show it's like enslavement, and all those different things are part of our history, but the growth of who we are and who we are, what we accomplished, is just as important. The negative things that happens to us are just a footnote to the greatness that's our story. And that's why I decided to write the book, to show this is what we were capable of. And that's what we still are capable of right now.
Well, I tell you this, man. Professor Julian Waddell. We appreciate you coming on, man. And any last thoughts you want to tell us, how to be able to get your book and all that? And then, of course, my mother's the one that actually said, it's me. I want the book. So we're gonna make sure she get a book too. I might have to buy another one. But I just want to tell you, thank you for coming on, man. Any last word before we get up out of here?
I'm just grateful to be able to be on your show. It was a pleasure. And of course, you can buy it on Amazon right now.
All right. There it is, baby. But look, remember, the true outcome of having a mindset of successful thinking is having an unwavering expectation of successfully achieving a predetermined goal, knowing that the outcome was supposed to happen. Thank you to Professor Julian Waddell. And go get his book, The Tales from the Greenwood District. Tales from the Greenwood District, right here. Talk about Black Wall Street, but more in a positive light rather than just the massacre, man. We appreciate y'all. Be inspired. Go get his book, man. Go get his book. We just make it happen. I'm gonna put it in the description as well. All right, y'all be good.